Hey programmers, what is going on? I'm the Savage Coder, and this is episode 36. I thought for this episode we would take a look deeper into React by using it to build an app. Today, we're going to make a Wordle app. Well, a Wordle-ish app. We're going to take it in two steps. The first step is just coming up with the basic idea, a one-line kind of gamified UI, and then probably in the following episode we'll actually turn it into a full Wordle game that gives you all the information and gives you your 6 tries. So if that's interesting to you, stick around, check it out. But first, all right, so I'm sure most of you know the Wordle game, so I'm not going to go into how that works and how it looks. I'm just going to assume you do. If you don't, Google it, and where the hell have you been living? All right, so in my projects folder, let's create a new folder, and we'll call this Episode 36. And inside that folder, I'm going to go to a command prompt by clicking into my path there, typing CMD, and if I bring that onto this monitor, we can do our npx create React app, and let's call it Wordle-ish basic, and this is just going to be the basic version we talked about before the break. And we'll do this with a template of TypeScript because that's how I like to do it. And I'm going to do a -- use -npm because I like npm. So let's let that spin up, and then we will go from there. So I am going to cd into the Wordle-ish basic directory, and I'm going to type code dot, and it doesn't know what code dot is. And sorry, that's not going to work for me. It will work for you unless you have the insiders build, which is not named code. So I don't actually know the name of that, and it's easier for me to just open a window here. We'll go to our projects, episode 36, Wordle-ish basic, and I'll open this folder. I'm going to also start a terminal just so that I have that. And if we npm start here, we have our basic React app. Okay, I'm going to close this Get Started tab, and I'm going to bring this terminal down just to be out of our way. So the first thing I want to do is we're going to use Tailwind here. So I'm going to open up another command prompt terminal here, and we're going to add Tailwind. So how do we do that? Let's open a tab here. Oops, search. Well, it worked. So TailwindCss.com, and if we go to Getting Started and we look at the framework guides, one of the frameworks here is Create React App. That's the one we want. So I'm going to go there. So go ahead and create the app. We already did that. Install Tailwind. So I'm just going to grab a copy here, and that's going to run these 2 npm commands if all goes well. Just going to paste, and then hit enter after that one. And that Tailwind init-p is going to create this tailwind.conf config file. All right, so we did that. And it created the post CSS config file as well. Now we are going to add this line here inside our Tailwind config inside the content array. Easy enough. We can just paste that in there. I'll save that. And then the next thing we have to do is we have to add the Tailwind directive in our source index.css. So I'm just gonna, we can just click this little guy and copy that. Now let's open our index.css, which is for us the index.css here in the source folder. And we'll go ahead and copy those in. Don't worry about these underlines. That's just VS Code not really understanding the post CSS style there with the @ sign. And then we can npm run start, and we can test it by using some Tailwind classes. So let's try that. We're already npm started. Our index.tsx is running the app component. So if we look in app.tsx, we should be able to take, let's say this, let's use this code tag. I can add a class name, and the class name is going to be text, what was the, it said, font bold. So let's try that one. Font dash bold. And so before I hit save, let's go back to, we're already in the browser. Let's go back. So we're looking at this text right here. And so when I hit save, let's see if it gets bolder. Kind of hard to tell there. Let's try something like text dash 4XL just to make it bigger. And it's not working. So I'm going to go back to my first prompt here, and I'm going to rerun this just to make sure it doesn't have to read those config files at startup. So let's see, we'll close that one. And let's see if we have some more luck here. We do. Now you can see how big this is compared to the way it was. So our Tailwind CSS is in, and we can use its built-in classes. And all you've got to do to use that is go to the documentation. In the documentation, if you scroll down, there are all of the CSS styles. And so if you wanted to use a flex box and use flex, then it shows you what Tailwind calls it and what the actual CSS is going to render as. And the idea with Tailwind is that you don't have to create all the classes that are in this class name. They're already built in with Tailwind, and you should be able to do probably 99% of what you need with their pre-built classes. The only downside is, and the reason some people don't like it, is because it takes a lot of classes to style certain things, and people don't like a ton of classes in there. I don't mind it because you can read each one and know what it's doing. Whereas if you make your own CSS, you have to look at it and hope that whoever wrote the CSS, especially if it's not you, named it something meaningful, and then you have to go into another file to actually read what does app header do? I don't know what that does. I would have to go in here, or in here, and I'd have to find app header and to know that it does all these things. So instead of that, it's basically like taking all these things with a common syntax and applying them directly to that node. So we'll see how that goes as we move along. All right, so I'm going to close all these other files for now, because all we're going to concentrate on for the moment is app.tsx. So let's start looking at what our game is going to look like. So I'm going to remove everything inside my div, because I don't need that. I'm not going to use this class name app either. As a matter of fact, I don't even think I need app CSS. I don't need the logo for React, and I don't need the import for React because I'm using a late enough version where the compiler is actually going to do that import for me, so I don't have to type it every time. So that also means that my app.css has all this stuff in it that I also don't need. So I'm going to select all and just empty my app CSS and save. And so now my page should be blank, and it is. So we're starting with an empty canvas. let's just put a div in here right now that just says word. I always have trouble spelling my own Wordle-ish. Oh, I think I put an E in there. Wordle-ish. Okay. And so I'm gonna move this over. All right. So let's now add some Tailwind CSS. So the first thing I'm gonna add is a container. And I'll keep hitting save so that you can see what these things do. I'm going to do MX auto, which is going to give a auto margin. M is for margin. X means the x-axis, which is margin on the left and margin on the right. So it's the same thing as setting, margin auto in CSS. And then I'm going to do a PY4 and a PX2. That is adding padding of 4 and on the top and bottom, and padding on the x-axis, which is left and right. Just think of it as XY coordinates on a graph. Maybe it's easier for you to think about it if I put them in that order. And so now you see we move down by a unit of 4. And if you look in the Tailwind documentation and you look at the spacing, then you'll see what those spaces, like the 4 and the 2, what they are. And so you can override default spacings with it and stuff. But here's kind of the... So when we said PX2, that's actually like 0.5 rem or 8 pixels. So that's what these. If you're interested and you want to know what it is, you can look it up. But if you just use their built-in sizes, if you can, then it just keeps things simple. So you can just say, oh, it's 4 from the top and bottom and 2 from the left and right. And the reason that it looks more than 2 here is because of this MX auto. So if we put a border around that, that's kind of hard to see. So let's do a border. I think you can just do border black. Yeah. So there's the 2 pixels there. And the MX auto is what's kind of centering the whole div on the box. Right? So now what I want to do is let's change this title from a div to an H1. And in Tailwind, it actually resets all of the styles like H1. So when I make an H1, you would expect it to get like a big heading, but it's not gonna, because an H1 doesn't have a meaning in Tailwind. We have to tell it what an H1 is. And so let's do that with a class name. Now, if you find that you already know your sizes for what an H1 is, you can actually go into your Tailwind configure and you can extend the theme and you can name an H1 as this many pixels. So you can set it up in there so that when you just use an H1, you don't need the classes. But since we haven't done that yet, then we're going to have to type them all out here. So here's where you'll see it gets a little... so we're going to do a font medium, and letting is tight to keep the letters next to each other. And then a text -4XL. We saw this earlier, that makes it like you can do text SM for small, MED for medium. You can do LG, and then you can do XL, 2XL, 3XL, 4XL. I forget how high it goes, but so we can start with that, and I'm just going to do a text black 600. And the 600, if you look that up in Tailwind, if you go to colors, so all the colors that are built in. So if we find black, will be probably, where is black? Did I pass it? That probably is black. Well, maybe not. I'm not sure. I know black is built in. But you can see the numbers here are the weights. So if you get a color that it starts out light, you can do, 5, 6, 700, 800, 900. The lime has lighter colors because it doesn't get quite as dark. So you can look up the color that you want. And I know that white and black have their built-in colors. And you can add in your Tailwind conf, you can go in here and we're going to do that. We're going to add a couple of colors of our own that are not in this list. So you'll see how to do that when we get there. So I'm going to save that. And that is going to affect that class. And I'm actually going to move it down a little bit. So let's go and add in also a margin top 0 and a margin bottom of 2. And so the margin bottom will actually push this guy down so that we can get rid of that border, so that it won't sit right on top of our Wordle board. Okay. And so the only thing we're missing here is we need to center this Wordle-ish title in the page. So there's a couple ways we could do it. Text center. Yeah. I normally use Flexbox for that, but in this case, text center is going to work fine. And that'll save us some extra divs and stuff like that. Let's put a div here, and this is just going to be like our selected word. So it's just going to pick our word that we have to guess, and we're just going to print it out to the screen so that we can see it while we design it. And since it's going to end up picking a random word every time, it's going to be helpful for us while we're building it to just print our selected word to the screen. So I do want that centered as well. So for now, we'll just see if text center is going to work for us again. And it did. All right. So that's pretty much our heading. Now we're going to make a div that's going to hold our Wordle game. We're going to use a Flexbox to center everything. And then we're going to use the grid system in Tailwind. If you look at display, show all classes, it was hidden. That's why. There's grid. So we're going to use the display grid, which is kind of like a 2-dimensional Flexbox. And we're just going to set up, we'll see as we go here. So let's do our class name. And in here, we're going to use a Flexbox. We'll do items center and justify center. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a horizontal box, and it's going to put everything inside this, all the direct children inside this div. It's going to center them both horizontally and vertically within the div. So we won't see anything there, but now when we put something in it, we will. So let's make an input. This is kind of our box for our letters, right? Because we're gonna put it's a 5-letter word, so we need 5 text boxes. So if I just do like input type equal text, and let's just stop there for now. Okay. Oops, I gotta close my quote there. So there probably is a text box on there that we can't. There it is. So again, in Tailwind, it clears all stylings of everything like input boxes. Anything that's styled by default, it removes that. So I can actually put a cursor in there and I can type in there, but I can't even see my cursor. I can't, it's the wrong size. I need 5 of these. So let's add some classes to this to make it look right. And so I'm going to do, we need a border around our text box. So let's do border and border gray 500. Let's see what that does for us. So that's not too bad. I think that border is kind of thin though. Let's try making that border -2 to make that a little bigger. That looks a little better. So let's make the text color gray darkest. That's a little better. And then I'm going to move this to the next line just so you can continue to see me type here. We're going to do a W16 to make that text box smaller. And so we only want, let's get some padding in there. So maybe like, let's try PY2. Let's do PX3. And then let's make the, that's a little too small. That looks pretty good, right? Because the font's too small. So let's make that bigger. So after the width of 16, let's make the text XL. XL. Yeah, it's still not big enough. 2XL. Oh, that's a little better. At least we can read it now. And I want that text centered in that box. So let's do text center. And that looks pretty good. What is that little dot there? I gotta inspect to see what that is. I thought it was a spot on my monitor, but it looks like it's actually there. Oh, there's a quote there. We must have a quote after our text box. I'm just looking at it in here, and after, after the input here, there it is right there. So let's look in our let's look at this. Probably because I have it compressed here. Let's see. Okay, maybe it's because this is on 2 lines. Let's see. No, it's still there. Where do I have that? It's in there. Oh, there it is at the end there. I actually had an extra quote at the end. There we go. Now you can stop cleaning your monitor. So that looks actually really good. One thing I do want to add, do a max length equal 1. We put the curly braces around that because it's an actual like value, like a JavaScript value, instead of just like a string. And so now we won't be able to type more than 1 character in there. So that's good. Cool. All right, so now we just need like a bunch of these. So let's see if we had, well, I can use Shift Alt down arrow. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's say we had 5 of them. Okay, starting to look like something. We need some space between these boxes. Let's go ahead and throw these in a grid. So I'm going to, and we'll probably have to redo these inputs because they're going to need some more stuff. And whatever we do to the first one, we're going to have to do to the others. So I'll probably end up just, working on one of these and then copying them down when we're done like we just did. And so for this class name, I'd like to do a display grid, which is just grid. And then we'll define the grid columns 5, which means 5 columns in our grid. And then let's do a gap of 4. And maybe 4 is too big, but actually, that looks pretty good. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so we've got our 5 boxes. Awesome. One thing we're gonna need to do is we're gonna need to select these boxes so that when you type a letter into this, it jumps to the next box for you, because that's how the real Wordle works. So in order to do that, we need to be able to select the box. I think the easiest way to do that is going to be to give this thing a name. We could just do something like this, where I could say name is equal to guess 0. And then this one would be guess-1 and then guess-2. And that way we would know what position we're in. Thinking ahead, we're probably going to need to do something like 0-0 and then 0-1 and 0-2, because we're going to have 6 tries. So really, this row, all 5 of these represent the first guess, or the 0th guess, if we're keeping track of these in some sort of an array. But for now, we're just doing 1 row here. So well, let's leave it guess 0-0. That may not be the name anyway when we do the next piece of this. And just for the heck of it, I'm gonna also name this guess 0-0 for the ID. I don't know that we'll need this, but it's just an extra selector we can have in there. Let's take a break from this stuff and let's get our words. Let's get our random words so we can actually start playing this game. So I went on GitHub and I found a list of words. Let's see. 5-letter words. 5-letter word dictionary GitHub. And so I found this 5-letter words by Charles Reed 1. And so thanks to him, we have this huge list of 5-letter words. You can get your list from anywhere. I just kind of stumbled across this one. And so all I did was I went in and I chose the view raw, and that gives it to me just with text, and I did a Control-A to select all, copy, and I pasted that into a local file. So let's do that now. So I'm gonna copy all those, and let's move that back over there. And I'm gonna open up my file explorer, and we're gonna call this as if it's an API. And so because we're gonna need something to call, I'm gonna use the built-in dev server with React here to serve it up, since it's just a one-time call with a list of words. So I'm just gonna go into this public folder here, and I'm gonna right click and do new folder, and I'm just gonna call the folder data. And then in data, I'm gonna right click, new file, and we're just gonna call it words.txt. And then I'm just gonna paste my word list in there. So there's 5,757 words to choose from. So cool. Now, the real Wordle, I think, has more words, and it also takes out words, I believe, that have like repeating letters that would have 2 E's in it and things like that. So, because those are harder to guess, and it's also harder to deal with our rules of whether it's in the right place or not. We're not going to deal with that. We're just going to not deal with that rule at all. If we come up with a word that has 2 of the same letter, we'll just refresh the page. Again, this is not a full implementation of a game. This is just our way of doing it. All right, so now we got our file of words in data. We're going to need some way to call that. And so we're going to load Axios. So I'm going to do an npm install Axios. If you like fetch, you can use that too. And so now what we want to do is when we first load this file, this game, we want to load the whole word list. So that screams use effect. Use effect just to quickly cover. Looks like that, and useEffect is imported from React. So I just added that by tabbing when I hit useEffect. And what it is it's a anonymous method that calls the code that's in here, and it calls it based on any dependency variables that you put in this array. And so if you leave the array blank and there's no dependencies, then it just runs once when the page loads, when you refresh the page. And so that works perfect for us. You can, if this is empty, you can think of it like an init function or an onload function kind of thing. The one bad thing about the useEffect is it doesn't like when you name this async. So in order to call an async function in here, we need async because we're going to use Axios to go and call and grab that word list. So what we're going to do is we're going to create our own init method. So I'm just going to say const init is equal to some method that just has some code in it. And then to make sure that runs when we fire our useEffect, we'll just call init. And so this is just a method defined in here. That's not going to do anything. But then when we hit this line of code, it'll call init, which calls this, which will then run all this code. And that one we can actually make async, which helps us out. So in order to do this, we need a place to store our word list, right? So let's go up here under the app, and I'm going to make a constant called word list, comma, and my copilot will help me fill in the rest of that. That, of course, is using useState, which I can import next to my useEffect. And it's going to start out as an empty array. And once we run our useEffect, then we will be able to call setWordList to load the words, and then we can just use them in this variable. So this is the variable. This is the function we call to set the variable. Cool. So let's go ahead and let's write some code. So first thing I want to do is I don't want to populate the word list if it's empty, if it's starting off empty. I want to use it, but if it has things in it, then I don't want to use it. So I could say wordList.length if it equals 0, right? Then, I'm not. That's that copilot getting away from me. Equals 0. Then I want to call Axios. So I need some kind of variable to hold the response. So const response equals await axios.get. And I'm just going to hard code the URL here, which is what I'm running for my actual game, which is this localhost 3000. So I'm just going to call localhost 3000, and then after that, I want the data directory, and then the we called it words.txt, and that's all that takes, right? So we get our response back, and so what we need to do, though, if you remember how the words are in here, they're one per line. So actually, after this, there is a return and then a new line. So there's invisible characters at the end of each of these rows, or at the end of each word, that we're going to have to get rid of. And the best way, the easiest way to do that is to go through this list and one at a time add them to an array. That way we can work with that. So let's get the list as it stands right there, right? We could do constant words equals response dot data. Okay, and so if we want to see that, we could console.log. Actually, instead of log, I'm going to do dir words, and let's inspect our page here. Let me dock this guy back in the bottom of that so that we can just look at it that way. And so if I save now and there it goes. Okay, so we already got it. So it ran this and it called the get, and then we grabbed the data. So you can see that there's still one per line here. They're not really in any structured way that we can use them in code as an array. This is not array 0, array 1, array 2. This is just like one big blob of data with returns, like one big string, if you will. So I think the best way to do this is we're going to have a constant called converted. And we're going to take our words, which is this variable right here, and we're going to split the words on \r\n, and that is the escape code for return a new line. So we're basically saying take each one of these, and every time you see a return new line, I want you to put each one into its own array element. Let's copy that into the dir, and right now that's an any. So I think the best way to do this is to do a map on it, and let's do word, which is a string, and we'll arrow, and I'll explain what this is doing to lowercase. That's good. Okay, so what is this actually doing here? Hopefully this is big enough. So we're taking our words and we're splitting it by line, basically. And then we are looping through each one of those, each word, and we're doing a 2 lowercase on them. Just in case this ever has any capital letters, we want them all in lowercase. So that was more of a, you really could probably do it without this map, but I think that's more of a proper way to do it, just to have your data in a known, state, especially since I'm getting this from some third party. So let's save that and see what that does. Now I put converted in console.dir. And so now when I refresh the page, instead of being one long string, you see we've got this huge array of 5,000 items. And if we look at it, the Chrome tools is what's doing this stuff just to make it manageable so we can see it. But here's like 0 through 99, and you can see each one's a string in lowercase in an array. So now we got stuff we can work with. Let's call set word list. That's this function up here to set our state, and we're going to give it converted. And that way we always have our list. And the other thing we need to do now that we have the list is we need to select our words. So I think we can do that when we refresh the page. So after we get this, and we have our word list, let's create some state to hold our selected word. So I'm going to call that selected word and set selected word, and the selected word starts off empty, so that's fine. So now if to select a random word out of our huge array, all we really need is an index, right? A number. So if I had number 700, then this would be the word. If I randomly picked 709, this would be the word. So I think that's going to work good. So let's grab a random number. So const random index is equal to, and we'll do a math.floor, floor, and then we'll do a math.random, and we'll multiply that by the length of the converted array. And so that's going to pick a random number between 0 and the converted length, and math.floor returns it as an integer. So that comes back as a number. And so to set now that we have a randomly selected integer, we can just say set selected word is going to be converted, which is our array, and the index is the random index. Let's run that. We're no longer console logging, so we won't see anything here. But let's go ahead and take our selected word and let's print that out on the web page, because that's what we wanted to do. So we're going to replace selected word. Going to get rid of that. We're going to open up some curlies because we want to put a JavaScript variable in there, or a TypeScript variable. And I'm going to put the variable selected word, hit save. And if we refresh the page, you see ether, tided, it's picking completely random words, which is awesome. So we got that far. Only took us an hour. So now we need to write a couple of methods so that when we type something in here on change, we actually update our guess. We need to store our guess so that we can evaluate it. So we need our onChange, and then the onChange will actually set the value of the text box. Because that's how form inputs are handled in React. You trigger the change and you set a variable. And so basically you like bind this text box to a certain variable. So every time you type something in there, you update the variable, and then that variable updates what's in the text box. Even though you already typed it, it actually needs to fill in the screen. So if we go to this text box, we can do something like say, so I see a mistake I made. This array is an array of dependencies that useEffect cares about that causes it to re-render. And while we can set any use state that we have inside here, it doesn't care about that. But the fact that we're reading it back out is a problem for useEffect, because it doesn't know if something changes. We're checking wordList.length. Well, what if there's another method on this page or in the render, something modifies the length of the word list? So it doesn't know at that point whether or not it should re-render the useEffect. So because we're reading it in there, we actually have to add the word list now to the dependency to make it happy. And so now, since we're about to start modifying our input to track our guess, we need a way to store our guess. We need some state so that each letter that we put in here is building our answer. We don't grade it until there's a button that's going to be down here for ours, just to make it easy. And when you click the button, it's going to evaluate your guess, but it's going to evaluate all of them, right? Not just one. Your guess isn't this box. Your guess is the whole row of boxes. So the first thing I want to do is I want to right-click the source folder, and I'm going to do a new folder, and we're going to add models. And the model that we're going to add in there, new file, is guess.ts. Let's go ahead and do the basics here, just so that just so we can get rid of that error. So guess, boom, and if I save now, then okay, well, at least we get our UI back. We have to think about what our guess is. Our guess is going to be some row. Eventually, we only have one row right now, but we're going to have 6 guesses. We're going to have 6 times 5 guesses, right? So what I'm thinking here is, and this may change in the final one, but I'm thinking that we first say that a guess is a row, so that we know what row this guess is for. And then we need to know if this guess is winner. So if everything is right, we're gonna trip this to true, so that the guess knows if they're all correct. And then the rest of this has to hold an array for each one of these, right? So the row says it's going to be this row, but then we need a property that's going to be an array of guesses, kind of. So I'm just going to call that items. And we're going to need another class to represent that guess. So I'm going to call it guess detail, or detail. And so let's right click our models and make a guess detail. And we will again export interface guess detail. And then we have to go back to our guess, and now we can import, and I can do that with control dot and add the import from guess detail. And so what a guess detail is going to be is everything about, let's fix that error, is everything about this particular guess. So I'm going to have to know which position we're in. So let's do a position. That's a number. And then we need the actual value that's in there, which is going to be a string, right? So this would be position 0, and the value in this case would be Q. Position 1 would be W, you know, and so on. And so one guess detail will be what the position of this guess is, what the value is, and then we're going to need to, when we score it, right, we're going to need to tell it, you know, we need to know, A, is it the correct letter in the correct box? Because we're going to have to make it one color. We're going to have to know, is it not in the answer at all? If I guess a Q and there's no Q in the answer, in the word twine, then this would have to go like gray. And if I have like an E here, it is in the word, but it's not the first character. So we would make that one yellow, saying, yeah, it's in the word, but this one's in the wrong position in the word. So since I need to know all those things, I'm just going to put them in here, and we'll just say, okay, is it correct? Is it not in place? Is it not in answer? And I'm going to need to style it somehow. So we'll just say that, you know, we're going to send some CSS so that we can style the box that this guess detail represents. And we'll just reuse this class for each one of these boxes in this row. So now you can see how a guess has a row, and then it has an array of guess detail, right? 5 of them. And then it knows if it's a winner, and then each one of the items in the guess detail knows, you know, what the value is, what position it is, and it knows if it's correct or not. Now we have to deal with that in code, so it gets a little tricky, but I think we can work through it. Let's start by, below this use effect, I'm just going to make an empty, something called update guess. And this is going to happen every time you change one of these boxes. We're going to call update guess. And so the update guess should have the value of whatever it is you've guessed, right? If I put a Q, then the value will come in as Q. And then I also need to know, which row you're in. In our case here, we only have one row because it's always going to be 0. But then I need to know which index it is of 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4 for the 5 of them. So I think it's just easiest to just call that X number and Y number. And then we'll use the arrow function, and so X is the row and Y is the index of that row. Let's call update guess from our text box. So in the first box, I'm going to do an onChange, and it's going to equal some curly braces. And we can capture the event with an arrow method. We're going to call update guess. We're going to pass the value, which is e.target.value, and it's going to be row 0, answer 0, right? Because this is the very first input box, so it's gonna be modifying this one, row 0, index 0. This is that X and Y that we're sending to update guess. And then we'll have to set the value here to whatever 0, 0 is in our guess. So we'll get to that after. But right now we're going to do this for every single one. And so let's put one more in here. Actually, just because, let's just copy this input. Can I highlight it and do it? Shift Alt arrow down. 1, 2, 3, 4. Save 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we got that right. And now we'll just have to change the on change because this is row 0, element 0. This one's 0, 1. This one's 0, 2. This one's 0, 3. And 0, 4. And we'll figure out a better way to do that when we have 6 rows of these. I don't want a million of those. Let's look at update guess. I think before we can update our guess, we have to make something to score all the guesses. So let's say const guesses, and in this case our empty array is a guess array. And so I'm going to hit control dot and import guess. So remember, each guess has a row number and an array of these, but the guess details. But this guesses is actually going to be able to hold 6 rows of these. So that's why it's not just one guess, it's an array of guesses. We're just going to deal with, one for now. So now inside here, let's assume that the guesses is already populated. What we want to do is we want to get, we're going to modify the guesses. And we can't modify state. We have to call set guesses, but we need to set guesses to something that doesn't have a reference to a list right now. So we need like a copy of guesses to set guesses. So let's create something that we can modify, and we will basically create our guesses from scratch every time, and then when we've got it the way we want it, we can just call set guesses and give it the new version of what guesses should hold. So for now, I'm gonna call this updated guesses, and it's gonna equal guesses with the spread operator. And so that's going to make a copy of guesses and store it in that variable. And this variable does not have any references back to this array or the values in that array. So we're good there. So we want to know if the guesses.length is 0, then we want to do something, and then otherwise we want to do something else. So why do we do this if else? So if I know that this is empty, when I put an array in here, I know I need to push this onto the array. If there's already a value there and I change it to something else, then I don't want to push a new value. I don't want another row. I want to modify the row that's already there. So I'm basically saying if there's nothing in the array for this row 0, let's push a value on with the very first guess. But then once I have a 0th row, all I want to do is modify the values of the things in that row. And so that's what I'm saying here. If it's empty, then we're gonna push a new value into our array, and otherwise we'll just update the array value that exists. And so how are we going to do that? We are going to do an updated guesses.push. And updated guesses is our array of guesses. So I need to push a guess, right? Because guesses holds an array of these guesses, right? This guess object or interface. So I need to push an object that is going to be a guess in there. So what does that object look like? Well, if we remember our guess, it has a row, it has the items in that row, and it has whether it's a winner or not. Well, we don't know if it's a winner or not, so we don't have to even mess with that. As a matter of fact, we probably should go back here and make is winner optional. And let's go into guess details while I'm at it. And let's make the is correct. And these guys, let's make them optional as well. Okay. Save. So, model build failure, syntax error. Okay, that's fine because we're still doing stuff here. So now what we want to do is we want to push a new guess object. So it has a row. And what row is it? Well, the row is whatever X is sending in. Remember, this is our row and this is our index for the value. So the row is going to be X. And then after that, I have my items array. So let's go ahead and put an array. And in that array, right, I need an object in there. And this is going to be a guess detail object. And we need to control dot, oops. We need to control dot and add the import for guess detail. So now, what are we adding into the items? I want the position, right? Because we're looking at this, right? Position and value is what we want to fill in. And so the position is going to be Y. We said that that's the text box for the first box is going to send in 0, 0. So it's going to go to row 0, item position 0. And the value that we're going to store in there is actually the value that we're passing in from the text box here. Now, oh, we need a comma there. When you have something that has the same exact spelling, where the name of the variable is the same as the name of the object, you don't have to do value : value. JavaScript lets you just put value, and it will infer that the name is also value. So that's just kind of shorthand. And that's it for that. So that'll add our row and our position and value into our updated guesses. And then basically after the else and before the guesses the if statement, oops, where am I? Lost my place there. Yep, that's fine. So now we're going to update, set guesses, and we're going to use exactly what Copilot is suggesting, this updated guesses. So we make a copy. If it's empty, we push a new row with a value. If there's already a value, we don't want to push a new row. We want to actually go into the updated guesses. Well, which updated guess are we going to grab? Well, we want the row, right? This is a list of rows. So we want row X because X in our case is 0. And then we want to go into the items in our guess, right? Because we went into our guess. Now we're going to go into the items. And so which item do we want? We want the item that has Y, the Y index. So row 0, item 0, in this case, is what's being passed in. And then we want that to equal kind of what we did up here where we pushed this new object on there. Well, now that we have our actual item, we want this part right here, right? Because here we're pushing a brand new object with items in it. But when we're in the else, we're saying, well, there's already a row there. There's already stuff there. So just find row 0 and find the items that you want. And then we want to make that equal one of these items, which is a guess detail. So really what we want is we want to add, you know, just so you can see this, we want as guest detail. And so what does our item look like that we're storing? Well, it has position Y, and it has the value, just like we did up here. So really, this is the same as this from here to here. So it's just one way we're pushing a new one, the other way we're updating the existing item. And either way, when we're done with that, we set our guesses. So now that our guesses are going to be set, we can go in here and we can just say, hey, the value is going to equal some kind of, you know, whatever the guess is for, you know, 0, 0. We need a method that's gonna do this for us. So let's make one. Let's say get value 0, 0, right? And that doesn't exist yet, so we have an error. If we take this out, let's make sure we actually are building. Without that, we are not. We do have an error, so let's fix that first. So it looks like in app.tsx return outside of function. So it looks like we screwed up the curly braces somewhere. The use effect one looks okay, so it's probably in here. So yeah. So it looks like this one closes out the method, so I think I got an extra one. I'm just going to delete this one. Okay, now we're back. And so let's go ahead and do that again, where a value equals, and we're going to say get value, and we'll pass in 0, 0. Okay, let's go ahead and implement this get value, and we're just going to do a const get value equals, thank you, Copilot. There's an error because we're not returning anything if we return quote quote, because the return of this function is what's getting set as the value on the text box. You have to return something for the text box. We want to determine what the value is here. So first thing we can do is we can say if the guesses.length is 0, right? If there is no guesses, then we want to return. So we probably don't have to deal with this now, but I'm going to point it out just because I thought about it. This X that comes in here is going to be zeros for now because we only have one row. But when we have more than one row, this could be like 1 through 5, 0 through 5 for the 6 guesses. So I want to make sure that not only is the guesses length not 0, but I also want to worry about if the guesses dot length is less than the value of X. And we still just want to return quote quote for that. So that just makes sure that if we're looking for the value of row number 1, there needs to be at least a row number 1 before we start trying to get the value. Because if we're looking for row number 1 because of a bug and we only have 0, then it's going to blow up if it ever tries. So that's just a little safeguard. So the real thing we're looking for here, though, is if guesses X, so that's the row, it has items. So if the length of the items minus 1 is less than Y, then return quote quote. So what we're doing there is kind of like what we're doing up here, where we're saying, okay, if you're asking for row 0 and box number 3, which is index of 2, right? 0, 1, 2. So if it's 0, 2. So if we go to if we go to row X and we look in the items, and the item's length, let's say we only put in the first box, which is A. So the item's length is going to be 1 because there's only one item. And if we have, you know, a letter in here, then it's going to be a length of 2. So just in case y is 4, we don't want to try and access items that are greater than what we have, or it'll blow up. So another safeguard, just kind of like the first two. And then as long as it exists, as long as the value is there, now we can just say return guesses row 0 or x dot items y and the value, whatever value is in that guess. Because we're setting that, remember, we're setting the position and the value. And position is basically a copy of the item's index. We actually don't even need this position value. It just makes things easier when you're debugging. If you're looking at things, when you're following along to make sure everything's right, it can get confusing, so I put it in there. But really, all we're checking is the y here, not the position here. You could do items y dot position, but if y doesn't exist, it gets hairy. So now, if I save that and refresh my page, I can put in a, and if let's do a console.log, and we're just going to copy this value. Save. So now when we type a letter, Q, 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 it's putting 5 of them there. So it is tracking them. And if we just look at our guesses, not the actual value. If I look at, let's do QWER. So you can see the first time it put a row 0, and there's my item array, QWER, right? Let's actually do this one at a time. So if I hit a Q, and I look in there, I get my items. My items has 0 elements or 1 element in it, and the value is Q. Let me see if I can make that bigger. There we go. Hopefully that's big enough. And so, and notice the position is 0. And there are 0 items in there, and it's row 0. So now if I put in a W here and we inspect, I still have this 0 rows, we're 1 row, but now there's 2 items in my array, and 0 has Q, and position 1 has W. So we're just adding an element to each. We're adding an element to the items array with each time we type. So now I should be able to copy this and put get value 0, 1 on this one, 0, 2 on this one, 0, 3 on this one, and 0, 4 on that one. And so now we actually have our code behind the scenes updating with what we're typing. And the object here is to kind of score this when we click a button. So next thing we want to do, let's put in a button. We're in the home stretch here. So I'm just going to do a regular button. Unfortunately, like everything else here, it doesn't look like much. Even though it is a button, it is unstyled. So I'm going to go into my button here, and we're going to do a class name, and I'm going to put some things in here from my other project that I already played with, which is a margin top of 2. We'll put a left margin of it 2, which moves it down a little bit. I'm going to put a border 1 and border white, and BG white. And then I have, let's do a text Wordle-ish. We're going to call it Wordle-ish dark. And this is where I'm going to put in some of those custom colors we talked about. I'm going to do a font medium. And let's do a font semi-bold. And then we're going to do a rounded. And a height of 10 and a width of 28. I think I got my colors wrong here, but I think once I put that, let's go ahead and make that color. So if you remember, we went into the Tailwind conf, and what we can do is we can extend the theme. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to tell it I've got a new color called Wordle-ish dark, and that's actually going to be oh, I know why, because I have to tell this that these are colors. See, Copilot knew, I didn't. Okay. Well, let's continue on for now. I'm gonna put in a hover. So we just do the hover state, hover colon, and then BG light gray. And so now when we hover, it should, does it not know what light gray is? Guess it doesn't know what light gray is. Let's add a light gray. So we're just going to do light gray. Okay. There we go. So now the hover is working with our light gray. That's good enough. And so let's also center this button. Hopefully we can just do text center. And that's not going to work. So I think the easiest way here is just to, let's do a flex call, so that'll make this div render as a column, which won't change anything here. And then we can go outside of the div and we can move our button right below that set of inputs, and then that'll be in the column below it. Right? So now it's going to center because the flex box is centering everything and it's stacking it instead of aligning it. So if this were flex, if this wasn't here, it would put the guess next to the boxes, which we don't want. So we want it below. So it's just stacking this div and then the guess button. So now when we click the guess button, we kind of want to score things. So I'm going to go after the class name here, and I'm going to say on click, go ahead and grade it. Okay, let's save that, and then let's add our grading system, which is const grade it. I think we want to loop through our guesses, but we're going to need to modify these guesses because we need to color them, right? And the colors are held inside this guess details CSS. And we also want to update these three as we evaluate each one. So we can't modify our guesses. We can't change these without making a copy, just like we did up here. We have to do this same thing so that we can modify that value. So let's make a local copy. We'll just call it guesses copy. And that's going to equal the spread operator guesses. Okay, so now we got our copy. And we are only really interested in row 0. We don't have to go through any big thing here. So let's just make a constant called current guess that we're just going to use here, and it's going to be our guesses copy. Yep, that's it exactly. Right? So the length, however many, whatever the latest guess is, which is 0 in our case, is going to be current guess is going to be guesses copy of 0, which is the length. And then so we can actually, just so we don't have to keep typing guesses copy 0 or dot length or whatever, we can say the current row is equal to the current guess dot row. So all that's doing is we're going into our guesses. Remember, it's an array of these with a row and items. So we're just saying grab guesses 0 and then grab whatever this row value is, which in our case is always going to be 0 because we only have 1. So it's going to be that actual row number, right? It's just a number that we're storing here. All right, now we have enough where we can check things. So let's see first if we have any correct guesses. So we're going to loop through our selected word length. Okay, our selected word, remember, is just a value, a string, but we can loop through that. So if I say for let I equal 0, do as long as I is less than selected word dot length, and then I plus plus. And so what that means is, if I can spell it right, selected word is a string, but if I do selected word, like if I did 2, it would grab me the third character. It's 0 base, so 0, 1, 2. So if I do selected word of I while it's in here, and I'm counting from 0 to the length of the string, I'm just going to go one letter at a time through this string, which is what I want because I want to check each character. So I can say, and now that I know, I know my row is 0, and now I'm going to know the position because I'm going through my word one at a time from 0 to the length. I actually have my X and Y. So I can use this get value and get the value for X, Y. So really cool that I can reuse this. So I can then say if get value, and then for X and Y, I just want current row, comma I. So if you get me that value, let's say, using this as an example, the word is revel, I guess, is the word. Well, looks like we lost our gap here. We'll have to... Oh, it's just because I'm zooming. And so let's say the row 0, the first letter is an R. Let's say we got it right. Right? So if we get value for 0, comma 0, because I starts at 0, so get value is going to return, in this case, an R. So if that equals the actual selected word at the same I, right, 0 in this case. So if this word's first character matches this guess, then we got it right, right? So what do we do if we get it right? So for us, just so we can check it, we'll say console.log correct. And then we're going to say, let's update our stuff. Current guess dot items of I, dot is correct is equal to true, right? We want to set that. And then we also want to say current guess items I dot CSS, and then we want to make it equal some value. We're going to call it BG for background. Correct answer. And so let's go add that correct answer into our colors. And I have those already, so I'm just going to copy and paste those. You can grab them from the repo here, just so we don't have to sit there and type those. It's just correct answer, and wrong place have three colors. So we're going to do BG, which is background, and use correct answer as that color. That's just kind of how Tailwind works. And that's all we got to do for there. And then let's see if the letter is in the word, right? But in the wrong spot. So we can say if selected word dot includes, and then get the value for the current row, comma I. So we want the same letter again. So if it was a match, we would have done this. We want to say get the value, which is an R, right? But we already know it's not correct. So we want to say let's say this was not an R. Let's say this time it's an E. Right? So an E is in the word. Well, it's in there twice, so let's use L. So L is in there, but it's the last letter, and I'm guessing it as the first letter. So it's not correct, but it get value current row I is going to return L. And then it's going to say, hey, does that word include that letter L? So if we wanted to really be safe, we really could just do that. If we wanted to really be safe, we could say and not current guess dot items I dot is correct. Oops, I got way too much going on here. That's wrong. That's got to be that. Okay. Now I think we're okay. Yeah. So I'm just basically saying make sure it's not correct, and if you find it in the word, because if it was correct, it's also in the word. But so this actually has to be here. Now that I think about it. So just to re-explain that, if we find the value in the word and it's in the right place in that actual index, then we got it right and is correct. We're setting to true. If we check to see if the letter exists in the word, well, if it's in the right place, it's gonna be included in there. So this is going to be true whether it's in the wrong place or if it's in the right place. So we also want to say if it's in the word, but we didn't already say it's correct, then we know it's in the wrong place. So now we kind of want to do these three things, right? But a little bit different. So we want to say something like wrong place, but it is in the word. And then is correct is going to be false, but not in place is going to be true. And the CSS is going to be BG wrong place. And that's from the colors we just put in, right? And then if we do the last case, which is it's not in the word at all. So if not selected word dot includes, right? It's really the same thing here. So we can do this whole thing again in here. But this time we want to say, hey, if it's not in the word, and just as a double check, it's not correct either, which this one will always be false. You don't actually need that check, but we can leave it. Then we can say not wrong letter, but we want to say not in word. And this one was called not in answer. And the CSS is going to be wrong, not wrong letter, but wrong answer. And so now we got the colors set. So in order to update our UI, right, like I can do this now. If we refresh here, let's get one. All right, melon. So let's do MELON. And then when I click guess, it's gonna, we see down here that it knows it's correct, but it hasn't colored the boxes because all we've done is set a CSS property. We haven't applied them. So we're gonna have to do that. So first thing we want to do is we need to know if we have a winner. So we could just say at the end, if the current guess, oops, not that. Hold on. If the current guess, sometimes Copilot's not so right. If current guess dot items dot filter, and let's just call it X dot is correct dot length, now it knows what I'm doing, equals selected word dot length. Then console log you win, and current guess dot is winner equal true. So let's look at what we have here. I'm gonna make this a little bigger for a second, if I can, or make that smaller by making it bigger. All right, I'm gonna move this to the next line just so you can see it for a moment. So we're saying grab the current guesses items. The items are each one of these, right? So what I want to do is I want to say go through each of the items in there. Each one will be called X as I go through the array. So X will be MELON and the whole object in there. So I'm looking at is correct, because remember, we marked is correct for each one of these individually. So now I'm saying filter all of them by is correct. So I know I have 5 characters in my items. So, you know, I have 5 total 0 through 4 items. So I'm saying filter out any of them that are not is correct true. So if I'm left with 5, the length of that is equal to the word's length, then I know each one of those items is a correct letter. And so if they're all correct, then you win. So I'm just kind of reevaluating. I'm just reevaluating each one of these corrects. So now, if we refresh, CORNU, I don't know what that word even means, but if I hit this, it says correct for each one of those that was correct, and then it says you win. So it knows we won the game now. And so what we want to do is we want to now, after we're done, we want to update our guesses with this copy, because we've gone into this copy and we've grabbed the guesses, the current guess, out of the copy. So this is still related to this. The copy doesn't have any relation back to the guesses variable, but current guess is just an index of guesses copy. So as we modified current guesses, we've been modifying this guesses copy. So now we have to write it back to where we are. So we're going to do set guesses, and we're going to do the guesses copy. And so now all we got to do is we have, if we look at, when we're done here, let's do one more, AGAPE. When we hit guess, if we look at the CSS for the item, you see it's got CSS applied in there because we set it right, you know, in these when they're right or wrong. And we know if it's now correct and what the value is. So now all we got to do is grab this value out of each one and apply it to the text box for the CSS. And it'll apply that background color to that box. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to go into our input. We're going to go to our CSS and our class, and we're going to change it from a quote to a backtick. So we'll change the front one and the back one. Make sure there's not an extra one. Then we have to use curly braces because backticks are JavaScript. So we create some some curly braces to tell it we're going to use JavaScript, and the only thing we're doing is using these interpolation characters instead of the regular quotes. And then at the very end of this, I can just open up a little JavaScript area here and write some JavaScript. Right? In this case, I'm going to say guesses of 0 because this is 0, 0. I'm in the first, right? I'm in the first input box. So I'm going to say guesses 0, and it may or may not exist. What if I haven't typed anything in 0 right here? So I'm just going to say it might have an items, and if it's not null, keep going. That's what the question mark means, that items is kind of optional if it exists. If it doesn't exist, don't blow up because it's null. I'm telling you, just ignore all of this if it's null. And so I'm going to now say items 0 because I know which one this is. It's the 0 box. And then again, I'm going to say if that has a CSS, then go ahead and grab that value and print it out right here at the end of my CSS. And so I can do this for each one. Yeah, it's going to paste right. So I just got to be careful how I do this. I still have to do the front side of these. And that's the button, so I think we're done there. And so over here, I just have to delete that, open up a curly, put a backtick. And that one's already done. So if I save that, you instantly see that we have a winner here. And so let's see if we can play this game a little. I'm going to close this for a minute. And so let's get some, well, that one has multiple. Let's get one. Okay, so truck. I'm gonna put the first letter is gonna be in the word but not in the right place. The second one, we'll make that one the right place and the right letter. This one we'll put a K. This one we'll put something that's not even in the word, like a Q. And let's put the last one as a, also not in the word, a P. And let's guess.
Oh no!
So we do have a problem here because R was supposed to be green because it is correct. So we have a bug we have something to debug here.
Not again!
So let's do that. So I'm going to inspect. I'm going to go to my sources. I'm going to close this console drawer for a minute, and I'm going to open Control P, and I'm going to do app.tsx and open that guy. And so I think we're interested in the grading, right? Not the update guess, not the get value. Let's look at grade it. And so correct was not right. So I'm going to put a breakpoint right there, and I'm going to refresh. So here's our new word. So I'm just going to put F as the first character, and then just garbage for, well, that one. All right. So F and E are actually in the word. So if I hit guess, so let's see what get value is for current row and I. I'm going to reopen my console drawer here and just say, what is get value? It is F. So it got the right value. So that's good. And let's see what selected word I is. So selected word I is also F. So it looks like it got that right. And so is it marking it correct? It is. And BG correct answer is the CSS. And then it doesn't go in there. It doesn't go in there. And it's not, you didn't win. Okay. So the logic looks like it's work. Oh, now it's green. Maybe something wasn't refreshed good. Let's try that again. Let's make the first one. Well, let's get a word without two. All right. So the first one, we're gonna make it completely wrong. The second one is gonna be right, and the third one is gonna be in the wrong place. And then we'll have another wrong letter and the right letter, wrong place. Yeah, it's definitely not working right. Let's take a look at how we're applying things here. Oh, I know what the problem is.
Well, it's about time.
Never copy and paste, people. Yeah, what's happening is it's only evaluating this first one, and Q is not in the list, so the rest of them are not in the list. The reason is that it's always looking at guesses 0, item 0 for each one. I forgot to go back and make this one item 1, this one item 2, this one item 3, this one item 4, and that should do it. So, let me save that. Hey, there we go. So it instantly jumps back now. So now our game is correct. And let's do BIRDS and you won. So it doesn't give you any feedback that you won, but it does grade it properly now. So that is our working simple example. We're going to let's stop with this for today. So what we did was we broke down how to do this array, and I know it might be a little confusing with the structure of things when you're looping through and looking at indexes of indexes. But if you think about it, it's just an object, right? With it just represents a row, and each row has a number of characters. So if you just keep that in mind, that items are characters, but they also hold some other things like, hey, is this character correct, or is it in the wrong place, or what position is it in? And so we can take that and we can make this a lot more efficient. We can turn our input into a custom control, and we can build out what we have here and make a full game out of it. And that is going to be the next episode. So I hope this was good stuff for you. If you found it interesting or fun, or you totally get it, awesome, very cool. Definitely pull down the code. The GitHub is in the description. And as always, if you found it useful, please subscribe. That helps motivate me to make more cool stuff like this. And then practice as always. And I will see you very soon with part 2 of this to redo some things here and make a complete game. And it's going to be fun. So make sure you check back. Make sure you hit that bell so that you know when it's there and we can go through it step by step. And with that, I will see you online.